Good evening, my dear friends. This is Dr. Prasanna Lod, All India Rank 524 in CSE, UPSC CSE 2019. Today we are going to have an interaction about the mains economy. Before that, I would like to give you my brief introduction that I have completed my graduation in MBBS from Government Medical College, Mumbai. I have also experience as a working professional in casualty of JJ Hospital, Mumbai. Uh, and in this process of civil services for the last uh, 3.5 years. So uh, I have some sorry for the technical glitches. So coming to the part of the UPSC preparation, now we all know that very less amount of time is left for the mains in coming years. Sorry, in the coming year to January 2021. So economy is one of the major section where most of the questions are asked, which are of analytical nature and of which is also very much asked from the current affairs. So they blend it, the current concept and the static concept, and then they ask in the respective year. So I guess most of the students appearing are from humanities and science background. So uh, one might find the economy as a challenging thing, as I myself will belong to a science background and graduated in medical sciences. But economy, if it is understood on a conceptual basis, if you get a conceptual clarity about it, then in my humble opinion, I think that one can score very good marks in this thing, because the basic myth about this subject is in the market people run behind the economics, which in Hindi is called as Arthashastra. But the UPSC is going to ask you, it's mentioned in the syllabus that they are going to ask Indian economy, Bharatiya Arthvyavastha. So economics is a very vast discipline in itself. So that's not in our syllabus. What's in our syllabus is Indian economy, or the economy as such, Bharatiya Arthvyavastha, that too in current respect. So uh, one must focus on what are the current happenings in our economy. Uh, that too 1 to 2 years back. So we should have a holistic knowledge of at least 3 years. So conceptual clarity is very important. So I would also convey my message to those who have cleared prelims this year. That paper was indeed tough, and if you still manage to make it, then I think that you have a good command on your own concepts and in your knowledge. So uh, mains shall not be any different for you now. Just the approach is different for prelims and for mains. In prelims is a very exhaustive thing, and the syllabus is also very vaguely defined. But it's not in the case of mains. Mains syllabus is very clear cutly defined. It's there on the website of the commission. Uh, Hardly a question comes which breaches the defined syllabus for the mains. So mains is very much defined, pretty much clear. So you need to have those syllabus and the keywords in your mind. And also the economic questions, though they are mentioned in GS3, but they can also be asked in GS2. For example, any in the governance, there is also growth questions related to growth and development for the governance part. So economic policies on the governance part may also be asked. uh, it may also be asked in GS1. It's very rare thing, but it may also go there, because in GS1 we have in syllabus society. And for example, if we take poverty, so poverty is a topic which can also be asked in GS1 under the Indian society. It can also be asked in the challenges to governance in paper 2, and it is can also be definitely asked in GS3 also. So tell you, people, what people do is they keep on writing the same things in GS 1, 2, and 3. If question is there, on poverty in all these three papers, they will write same content. So this is a cardinal mistake that you should never do. See, if the poverty, this is an example just to make you understand the poverty example. So if poverty is asked you in GS1, and if you are writing about the economic policies and failures and the international and global economy, you are not going to get marks. The question is asked under the head of Indian society. So you need to write the socio-economic dimensions of poverty, the urban-rural divide, the gender divide, the technological divide, the inter-regional disparity, the caste angle of poverty. So this is something that these points are expected in GS1 if the poverty is asked there. If it is under GS2, then yes, you can mention the Tendulkar line, the Lakadwala line, and all those policies where poverty is defined and who defines poverty, some credible reports, some parliamentary standing committee over it. And then you can also write about the government schemes which are helping to eliminate the poverty, specifically in rural areas, Urban Mission, AGEY, Ageyaru, Shama Prasad Mukherjee Yojana. Narega is also very much tool for reducing the extreme poverty for rural households. So you can quote it in GS2. If it is in the GS3, then you need to write, definitely write poverty from the dimensions of economy. What exactly you need to write is speak about inflation, causes of poverty. Inflation erodes the disposable income of poor more than the rich. So inflation is a punishment for poor. So write about inflation, what we can do to control inflation. Then monetary policy committee is there. Then many of the fiscal measures can also be taken. So uh, speak about that. If another dimension may be the global impact. Now today we know the world is interconnected, and the economies are highly integrated around the world. So uh, any impact in the or any disruption in the global chains of this network economy is ultimately going to have effect on each and every nation, and that too in a developing country like India with such a large population and huge economic inequality. It is going to impact us on a larger scale. So this is the approach. What I am explaining here is this: if the same thing is asked in paper 1, 2, and 3, you need to write the content accordingly, according to the syllabus, according to the demand of the question. Next thing, coming to the mains part, is you the first most important thing that you need to do is you need to complete your paper. You need to finish your paper, and that is the basic requirement of this examination. Next comes the quality of the content that you have written. So completing your paper is not an easy job. You have 10 questions of 250 words, that goes 2500 words, and 10 questions of 150 words, that is 1500 words. So total the commission is expecting you to write 4000 words in 180 minutes. Now if you divide and do calculation, that you will get 1 minute to write 22 words. Plus, I honestly say that nobody abides by the word limit, because write very exhaustive papers. So you you are going to write around 28 to 30 words in 1 minute. Plus, there is lot of loss of time in signing various sheets, attendance sheets. Plus, the most important thing that you require some time to think also. So see, completing the questions 20, attempting 20 questions is itself a humongous task. Itself is a very Herculean task. So for that you need to have writing speed plus conceptual clarity. You cannot afford to waste more time on thinking. You need to write, and simultaneously when you are writing the introduction, you need to simultaneously back in the back of your mind need to think about what's body you are going to make, what the structure of the body will be of the answer, what any possible flowchart or diagram you are going to put. While writing the body of the answer, again you have to think about the conclusion. What report, what data, what fact can I put to make my answer attractive and to validate my argument there? So these are the things which you need to do in an integrated manner, because that's how they want their civil servants to be. So speaking of this thing, I also the reproducing of the fact in the examination hall is also very important, and how you are going to reproduce if you have read tons of the fact, so that's not humanly possible. So restrict your sources. Of course they must be credible sources. Restrict your sources to the minimum, revise them multiple times, and think over them again and again. Try to blend and try to connect the dots. Try to connect the static concept with the current affairs. The the concept of economic growth, for example. So what is the status in the current quarter of the economic year? What was the status in the last of the same quarter in the last year? So have we consistently grown, or it's the graph is zigzag? So if you think in this way, then you visualize the concept, and that is the important thing that helps you to reproduce the concept in the examination hall, in the tense environment of that examination hall in the final day. So these were the some of my suggestions to you. Coming to the uh, how to approach the economic questions, I have made some I have collected all the economic questions from 2013 to 2019 mains. And why 2013 is because the syllabus, the pattern of the examination was changed this year. And if you see, the nature of the question that the commission is asking is relatively similar from 2013 to 19. So I have made them, and we are going to discuss some of the questions, and you will get to know how beautifully the commission frames a question, so that, as the name of the exam of the paper is general studies, how a generalist will also be able to write the answers on such specific questions. So questions are framed in that manner that everybody could answer it in a very generalist way, because they don't want a specialist opinion on any of the subject except for optionals. So we will start with the 2019 paper, which I have written last year. So, so we will take the first question. Enumerate the indirect taxes which have been subsumed in the GST, goods and service tax in India. Now, this is the first part of the question. Immediately, while I remember while I was writing this question, answer to this question, I, I always maintain my habit of breaking it down in all the parts that have been mentioned in the question. This was the first part. The key word here is enumerate, the first word. So you just need to enumerate. That's it. What people will do, if central excise duty is one of the tax that was subsumed, so they will try to write a sentence about it. That's a cardinal mistake. If the commission has specifically said enumerate, then you just need to enumerate, and that's it. Your work is done. So for enumeration, I had my mnemonic over this because I used to forget about the mnemonics help a lot in reproducing. So I used to forget about the taxes that were subsumed, because this was also a question in prelims 2018, and I got it wrong. So since that, which things comes under the GST, they asked in this question. So from that day, I focused on the GST much, because it's going to stay with us for the lifetime, and every year we can expect a question from it. So I made a mnemonic CASSC. So central excise duty, additional excise duty, service tax, countervailing tax. These were the central taxes that were subsumed under it. Then also the state taxes that were VAT, value-added taxation, purchase tax, luxury tax. These were the some of the state taxes that were subsumed. So I made a column of central taxes that were subsumed and state taxes that were subsumed. So this is about the first part. Second, also comment on the revenue implication of GST introduced in India since July 2007. Now, revenue implications. So their implications are of two types. uh, that may uh, be that, as we have seen, that states are complaining that their revenue is dropping. Okay, and while there is another argument that definitely this initial patch will be rough, but in an integrated manner, in a slow way, the revenue shall rise in a progressive manner. So uh, here, while writing, commenting on the revenue implication, you need to also comment about the nature of GST in a 2 to 3 ways, through 2 to 3 lines. Just write GST, rolling out GST was the largest indirect tax reform in the recent history of our country. It is a destination based tax which is levied on the every step of value addition. So the examiner will know that you are having a very clear cut clarity about GST when you mention it is a destination based tax. One thing, it is an indirect tax reform. Indeed, it is a very big indirect tax reform in the history of our country. Plus, third thing is that uh, the tax is levied upon every step where value has been added. So it is the tax on the value added and not the base product. So that was the main purpose of rolling out GST, to avoid the cascading effect, means quote unquote tax on tax. So the without mentioning much, you have expressed yourself in a very clear way. These are the shortcuts and the vocabulary of every subject that is self-explanatory. So you need to be writing in such a fashion that these things are appreciated in a simple language, but your vocabulary must be very strong. So what were the revenue implication? Uh, some states saying they have fallen. Initially it was rising up, then falling, then rising up, because see, economy, it's an indirect tax, and indirect tax, as you know, is also like punishment to poor. It's a regressive kind of taxation system. Is speaking in the economic terms. So uh, it's dependent on the consumption and demand of the masses. Now, whole economy is going into the spiraling down in the negative growth due to now it's COVID times, but last year it was also because of the inflation in the oil prices. So when consumption and demand are decreasing, then when the disposable income of the masses is decreasing, then it erodes the purchasing capacity of the masses, which in turn reduces the demand, which in turn reduces the consumption, which is ultimately reduces the revenue from the indirect taxes. So this you can draw in a circle. I had drawn there without writing much, and I completed this question. Okay, I will go to the next question then. Um, China-Pakistan economic corridor. There was a question on that in 2016. I guess these were my soft copy notes. 2018 CPEC. The China-Pakistan economic corridor is viewed as a cardinal subset of China's larger One Belt, One Road initiative. Now again, the same trick. Split the question in the subsections. Now this was the first section. Then give a brief description of CPEC and enumerate the reasons why India had distanced itself from the same. Now, same thing. First, they have given a statement that the question is in the second part of the question, but what answer you are expected to write, the direction has been set in the first sentence. uh, Definitely you have to give a brief description of the CPEC and the reason for India staying away from it, but the nature of the answer shall be directed in the direction where the first sentence is there. The first sentence has been given to you. That is, it is a subset of larger China's larger multi-ambitious OBOR, One Belt One Road initiative. So, uh, what you need to understand, you need not write these things, but you need to understand, this is the concept how I remembered about OBOR, right? China is basically a revisionist power. It thumps on its glorious cultural history from the past. And a revisionist power will always try to thump on the extreme nationalist sentiments on one hand, while also promising the fruits of economic gain on the another hand, so that they will have a silent and obedient citizenry, which is the nature of the polity of China. So, what happened that China successfully achieved double-digit growth rate for the last 2.5 decades. But in this decade, what China has seen is the falling uh, levels of income in the general household, and they knew that somehow this is going to resonate into the turmoil or restlessness in the Chinese citizenry, which is also seen in the last year's Hong Kong protest. So this is how, uh, to counter that, to make economic prosperity a promised dream, China has used its old time maritime Silk Route and road when the Silk Route was basically monopolized by China. So, and it was also when the China used to do very good business with the world many centuries back. So they fused their ancient cultural glory with the current economic promises that they are extending to their citizens. So this was the concept that you need to understand, and then the things will directly pop out. For example, you can start a statement with China, Pakistan. Uh, See, you can start the sentence with One Belt, Road initiative is a highly ambitious project by the current Chinese establishment to revive their old time, old time silk routes, land and marine. Now, in this, the belt part is the road, and the road part is the marine route. So you need, I guess you might be knowing this thing. The belt is on the road, and the one road, the BRI road part, that is the maritime route. So this shall be the opening statement. Now, the brief description of CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor. The Gwadar port, you must have been, it was in the news. The Gwadar port on the coast near it is in the Baluchistan region, first thing, which is one contentious region for Pakistan. Also, it starts from the Gilgit Baltistan. The Gilgit Baltistan, which is India, which which is the sovereign part of India, which we say as Pak occupied Kashmir. So one is the sovereign part of our country, and another is a Balochistan, which is also a contentious region for Pakistan. So the start and end both are in the contentious region. So starting from the Gilgit Baltistan and ending on the Gwadar port, this is not just an economic project, but also one of the other way of China's hegemonic practices to expand their domain and influence around India. What they are doing in South China Sea, they want to replicate same in the Arabian Sea, and this is what our policy makers think, and that's why India is also coming with an alternate plan with Chabahar port in Iran, Gulf of Persia, Gulf of Oman, sorry. So CPEC, this is the description. The China is saying about connecting infrastructure by roads, tunnels, railways, etc. Along with the boost to the business and transportation, reducing the cost of logistics. And for this, they will extend the loans to the country. In this case, it is Pakistan. So another thing that you need to understand is that this is the checkbook diplomacy of China, which is also called as the debt trap, DEVT, debt trap. So once a country fails to fulfill the debt obligation to China, then China overtakes that project and then acquires the land and resources around there, and that's where the thing starts going wrong, which we also seen in the Hambantota port of Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka failed to repay the debt, then the Chinese company took them over. And as we know, there are no companies in China; they are just the extension of the Chinese Politburo or the extension of the Chinese establishment or the government. So The railroad connectivity of CPEC that crosses the sovereign territory of our country is definitely a issue, not only an issue, contentious issue, but it also is a sore spot between the India, China, and Pakistan relationship. The cost of the project is projected to be around $46 billion, and huge there are huge lacunas and lack of transparency in the nature of funding that has been extending to the Pakistan. So definitely the question can also be put that shall India join the CPC, or shall India join not CPC but the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So what should be your approach in writing such questions is that uh, the BRI also had the BRI also has a component of CPEC, which violates the sovereignty of our country. Not only sovereignty, along with it also poses an imminent security threat to our national security. So, in view of that, unless and until China diverts an alternate route without violating our sovereign rights, also maintaining the transparency in the nature of funding to these projects, especially to the least developed countries and the developing countries, India shall refrain without any India shall refrain from joining any such adventure with China, because we India always upholds the rule-based, important word, keyword. This is the vocabulary you need to write. Rule-based, multipolar. China wants it to be unipolar world, but India will always uphold multipolarity of this world. Rule-based, multipolar world order. So this is how you need to conclude. The vocabulary shall be will start. Your start of the answer and your conclusion shall be very much you should be using the vocabulary that is very much according to the nature of the question asked. So this is the question that we have taken from 2016, and we will take the 2016 another question, the globalization. See, the economy, the questions, now we have discussed two questions, and here you must have seen that the nature of questions are very generalist, and they are always blended with the current happenings of that or previous year. So that is the fusion. So some part you need to know about the static syllabus, like what are taxations, or what is the debt trap diplomacy of China. These are the points, but that is fused with the current happening. Okay, so you need to address it in a address both the nature of the question. So this is another example how globalization has led to reduction of employment in the formal sector of Indian economy. Now, see the formal sector keywords: globalization, reduction of employment, the rising unemployment. We'll say how globalization has led to rising unemployment in the formal sector of Indian economy. Is increased informalization detrimental to the development of country? Two questions. They may seem different, but they are integrated. On one, there is a formal sector reducing in rising unemployment, and another, informalization is detrimental to the development of our country. Now you need to you can start this answer with um, in many ways. Uh, First, you can start with 1991 LPG reforms, that liberalization, privatization, and globalization. That was the beginning of the journey of this country on that path. Or you can also start it with the definition of globalization. What is globalization? Globalization means uh, expanding our horizons beyond our geographical boundaries, integration of our economies, interconnection of our world order, or increasing P2P, people to people contact. So these are all the nature of globalization. And you can also start with the definition. Directly answering the question, we can go to First, uh, globalization means it is always fused with the technology. Okay, the exchange of technology is there. So whenever a technology comes, whenever a technology comes, now understand this thing. It always replaces the former technology. So if a smartphone has came, so definitely the phones from the 10 years before what we had Symbians, they were replaced. So if that, due to that replacement, there will always be a small glitch. Some people are bound to lose their jobs. This is one thing. Okay, so people, but you can see it other way also. For every job lost due to globalization, an alternate job was created. Okay, an alternate job was created. So the question here is reduction of employment in formal sector of Indian economy. So what is formal sector? Industries. Industries were the most, where the reduction in employment was seen due to what globalization has brought technology. What is technology? That is automation, the machine operated enterprise. So what once for where the who once the industries which were labor intensive, for example apparels means garments and clothing, another footwear. So foot apparels, footwear. This you can to definitely quote as a case study in this, and you will definitely get marks. These are labor intensive. These were labor intensive uh, industries, but due to automation, the huge losses in the formal sector employment was seen. Example: the Girni Kamgar or the cotton mill on issue in Mumbai in the 1980s, 1970s, 80s. So hundreds of thousands of the labor lost their job due to the automated machines. But as I already said, for one nature of job lost, another nature of job was created. First, it was handloom, so now it is machine operated. But there is also a requirement of human inspection and an element of human inspection to oversee if the machine is working in a right way or not. So this is the UPSC what expects from you, a balanced opinion. You shall not be totally in favor of automation, because that would mean that you are inconsiderate for human employment, the day workers or laborers, and you shall not be too much vocal for the labor rights also, because we, if we want economic prosperity, the technological integration is inevitable. That's, you don't have a choice over there. You 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 must have to integrate your economies and the foundation on the technological might. So uh, the criticism part you can write is about what percentage of skilled labor force that we have created to sustain the employment in the formal sector, so as to save it from globalization. You will be surprised to know that we have only 2 to 4% of skilled workforce in our society. Only 2 to 4% of our labor workforce is skilled. And you know what percentage of skilled labor force out of total labor force the South Korea has? 96%. Same indices. I think USA, I am not able to remember, but it's around 80% of the workforce that they have in their country is skilled. In India, it's 2 to 4%. Though, because of the uh, skilled enhancement mission, skill development mission of the recent government, it has been projected that it might have risen to 5%, but it's still very low. So, uh, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana and this scheme that you can quote in the conclusion. So, uh, this is how the question of uh, economy, when it is integrated from globalization to our employment, that you need to write is globalization, technology, automation, um, Plus also, what was skilled labor 15 years back, now technology is highly upgraded. Now he may be called as unskilled 15 years later. So not only skilling, but reskilling is also the demand of the time. Let me quote an example. 15 years back we used to have CD players or DVD players. Now today no one uses that. Okay, so one might have be very perfectly skilled in DVD repairing, but today he will be called as unemployed and unskilled. He need to have upgraded himself in a technology, which is according to the demand of the time. So skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. This shall be the conclusion to counter such kind of question in a very innovative way. Now another question which I have written last year. Do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and low inflation have left the Indian economy in good shape? Now, see, for this thing, you two things: steady GDP growth, means economic growth, we will say, and low inflation. Low inflation. These are the two keywords on which around which your answer is going to be framed. Now they have asked you have left Indian economy in good shape, and there is a question mark. Now there is a scope to agree or disagree. If there would have not been a question mark, then you you must have you should have considered the statement as an assertive and should explain in that nature only. Now let's give reasons in support of your arguments. So this question was picked up from the line from the economic survey, 2018 and 19 economic survey, which said the economy has witnessed a gradual transition from a period of high and variable inflation. The inflation was very hot, very volatile, to लो हाई का लो हुआ है और volatile का stable हुआ है. See, high inflation is also not good and volatile is definitely not good. So low inflation, which is relatively stable from 2014 to 18. From back inflation, we have transition. We have seen. See, and another thing, uh, I have written this answer in support of the statement, and then I have countered also, so that my view seem to be balanced. So, do you agree? So, points to agree. On which points I agree that this statement is right. Is it steady growth rate, means economic growth rate, and low inflation, which is a very key requirement to boost the business sentiment in our country. You also think from your own perspective what kind of economy you are going to invest in. Definitely growth might slow steady growth, okay, low and sustained inflation, low and stable inflation, yes, these are the key parameters which boost the business sentiments, which increases the private investment, which creates the alternative jobs, which also which also circulates the money in the economy. Once money is circulated, then the demand is created. The demand is created because the consumption has risen because of the increasing disposable income, because of the private investment, and that's how increased demand, increased consumption also furthers the production of the manufacturing sector or the service sector, which also again creates the job. This is a virtuous cycle that has been set in. So yes, the first argument is that it is also kind of equitable thing. This statement is equitable thing because, as I already said, that inflation is a punishment to poor. It affects more to the poor than the rich because increased inflation erodes the value of money. It also erodes the disposable income of the poor. It also erodes the purchasing capacity of the poor, so that the poor has to pay more to buy the equal amount of quantity. But as he or she is a poor, he or she can't pay more, So she has to reduce her consumption. Reduction in consumption means reduction in demand, means reduction in manufacturing and job losses. This is another vicious cycle set in. So definitely, uh, steady economic growth plus low and stable inflation is definitely a relief for the poor in our economy, which is that means we can say it is a more equitable phenomenon. It also helps. It also helps to uh, these parameters also help government to maintain the fiscal discipline, as government need not to increase the expenditure, public expenditure, so as to infuse the money in economy. So, so that now where government is going to infuse the money from? Definitely, government is going to take the loans. If government will compete for the loans, that will leave very few resources to the private investors. So that is called as a crowding out effect. The private investors will leave your economy because government is competing with them in the banks, which are all again controlled by the government only. So this is not good for the economy. So if inflations are low and economic growth is steady, then government will need not increase the public expenditure beyond their target. So fiscal discipline can also be maintained. So these are the 3 points that I have written. That yes, I agree. Points to disagree, I quoted consumer price index that they have shown that the second quarter of the year has shown that reduction in the consumption, specifically in the rural areas. So, yes, this is a counter argument. This was true because of the rural and agrarian distress that last year has faced. Also, many credible international agencies has predicted about the reducing private investment in our economy. And the third criticism point where I disagreed with the statement was the ghost of double balance sheet problem. It always comes back to haunt our economy. To double balance sheet, the corporates the corporates have their sheets stressed and they are not able to repay the debt taken from the banks. In turn, banks also are exposed to the stress and they also have a disturbed balance sheet. So twin balance sheet uh, problem of our country. This was mentioned in an economic survey. I'm not remembering the year, but there was a whole chapter on the twin balance sheet problem of India. So, what is the way forward? So, way forward, I have said that yes, steady economic growth is there, but it has to be inclusive. See, if the growth is increased in the service sector demands highly skilled labor, highly skilled worker, an IT professional. For example, what a unskilled or semi-skilled or low-skilled uh, workforce is going to get in from service sector? No, they are not going to get jobs. They are not going to get accommodated there. So instead, I said that increase in the MSME, protecting our MSMEs, which not only absorbs not only absorbs the low skilled or unskilled, but it also is a labor intensive industry. It is also important for the decentralized growth of our country, which will also reduce the interregional disparity. So this is the way forward. Like promotion of labor intensive industries like MSMEs, protecting them, giving them the capital cushion as we could, and also uh, uh, empowering the RBI to maintain a disciplined monetary policy for this country on one hand, and government also honestly abiding with the FRBM laws and the capping with the fiscal discipline. So this is how I have written this question. So another question we will get from 2016 about gender budgeting. So this was the question because economic service spoke about the gender need of gender budgeting that year. So question is, women empowerment in India needs gender budgeting. What are the requirements and status of gender budgeting in Indian context? Do you see any question mark there in the first sentence? No. There was a question mark in the previous sentence. So There was a scope to agree or disagree according to your discretion. But now the commission has not left you with your discretion. It's an assertive sentence. Women empowerment in India needs gender budgeting. That's it. Accept the assertion and explain that thing. Second part of the question is what are the requirements and status of gender budgeting in Indian context? One thing is static, women empowerment through budgetary support. That is static thing. Now this immediately, this is the beauty of UPSC. Immediately they have jumped from the first part to second, which is dynamic, current. They have asked you about the current status in Indian context. So what you can start, definitely gender budget is concerned with the gender sensitive formulation of legislations, programs, schemes, subsidies to address the gender disparities specifically in the economic perspective. And now what is the rationale behind gender budgeting? Why there is need for gender budgeting? See, this is an unfortunate thing, but India traditionally is a patriarchal society. Not only India, the South Asia, if we see as a whole. Even there was a patriarchy in the West, but now they have somehow somewhat reduced in the percentage. Still in India, the what we called as the agency is weak in context of women. Women still don't have say in the important in specifically in the rural areas. They don't have a say in the economic planning of even of the household. So I have gathered or collected many important words from previous 4 to 5 economic surveys about gender and budget. For example, last year's economic survey said about empowerment of women. Then it also said means in even in the poor family, even in the extremely poor family, the most poor among all those members will be the women of that family. That is empowerment of female. Second was feminization of agriculture. What globalization has brought? Globalization has brought the technology in the urban areas or in the industrial belts of this country, completely neglecting the rural ethos of this country. So the job opportunities are created in the industrial belts or in the urban cities. So there is a huge demand for the cheap labor. Why multinationals come to India? Because of the cheap labor. Labor is at a very affordable prices in India, and that's why you can see the British Airways ticket booking call center is in the Haryana. Uh, the big conglomerates or the big multinationals, which are capitaled in United States, have their customer services bases in Pune or Bangalore. So because they can't afford to hire labor in their own country because of the very strict labor laws, they hire from our country because the labor is cheap. Now, where the cheap labor is coming from? The cheap labor for doing the menial work, mainly doing the unskilled work. Uh, the labor is coming from the rural areas, but majority means more than 90% of this labor is male. The males are migrating from rural areas to urban areas in seek of job employment. This is also you can connect how globalization has impacted the rural Indian women, leaving behind the old age, senile members of the family, along with all the women members, because urban setups are highly mismanaged. The slums and the over congestion of or urban areas have make it unaffordable for families to sustain, so that only single member of a family can survive but not the whole family. So there is living behind of women in the rural areas to see after the agriculture as enterprise. So this has led to the feminization of agriculture. This was all explained from the economic survey. None of the words are from coming from me. I have conceptually understood and always followed the government paper in the civil service preparation, because I also worked as a government officer in the Asia's biggest JJ hospital in Mumbai. So I know what important, how the statistics are important and dear to government. So, economic surveys speak of the feminization of agriculture, empowerment of female, feminization of agriculture. So, these are the things that that's why there is huge inequality even in a family, in a society. So, to address that inequality, as we are constitutionally mandated under the right to equality, this is how you diversify your this is how you diversify your content. Now, gender budgeting, we understood the impact of globalization. We understood in the language of economic survey, not our own language. तुम्हारी और हमारी बात को कोई भी अर्थ नहीं है कमीशन के नजरों में। जो आपको उसको क्रेडिबल सोर्स के साथ वैलिडेट करना पड़ेगा। यू हैव टू वैलिडेट सपोर्ट योर आर्ग्यूमेंट थ्रू अ क्रेडिबल रिपोर्ट और सोर्स। Economic survey is the best way to do in GS3 and GS2 economy part. So next thing, the gender budget, coming to gender budgeting, constitutionally mandated article right to equality with not on the discrimination of sex also written there. Even in the DPSP welfare state, we have this thing. uh, Even in the DPSP, it is constitutionally mandated. So this is how you can approach it. Status of gender budgeting. Now coming to the status of gender budgeting in India, in Indian context, it was first introduced in 2005 2006. Uh, there were different efforts on various part of the administration that not only they have supported the Indian women. For example, we can quote that self-help groups. These are very important. Self-help group (SHGs). These are the tool for empowerment of women, urban poor and rural poor. Definitely, self-help group model. You need to write that. Another thing was you can definitely quote a scheme. For example, what we can write is Stand Up India scheme. Stand Up India scheme where women entrepreneurs are being promoted by government of India from the socially disadvantaged sections of our society. So this is one thing, Stand Up India scheme. It's a very beautiful scheme which has revolutionized many women who didn't have the resources to do so in the past. So uh, status of gender budgeting. So you need to write in conclusion what is the, now we have written the both side of argument. See, then you can write it very beautifully. You can end it very beautifully. However, said and done, the government is doing what the government is doing all the efforts which are required for the gender budgeting. But uh, this is not just an economic or policy issue, but a social issue. And to, anything to happen in the social change, this change must come from society within. Unless and until we sensitize our society in a gender neutral way and extend the agencies of women empowerment, the gender budgeting alone won't do gender empowerment. There is a scope for doing a lot more. This is in this such a beautiful way you can end your answer. So I think we have completed 1 hour approximately. So we will take a 2 minutes break, and in 2 minutes we will again reassemble for discussing further new points. I would also share my strategy of writing mains specifically in the economic context, as I also never joined any coaching class and I had done all by my own. So I have developed my own style of writing answers. So we are going to discuss in the next 30 minutes. So till then, for 2 minutes we all will take break. Okay. So, welcome back, everybody. In the remaining 30 minutes, let's do this discussion in two ways, uh, bilateral. So, speaking of in the economy terms, the revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure, or the revenue or the capital side. The basic difference is revenue is one-sided and capital is two-sided. So let's switch from revenue-sided to capital-sided. So in the chat, uh, you may ask your questions. If you have any doubt, then we will definitely try to find a solution over that. Not just restricted to economy, you can also ask me any question from essay to GS4, and also about anthropology optional if you wish. So you may ask your questions. So are there any questions from your side? Okay. While you ask questions, we will also talk about the nature of other questions that were asked into last year, which I have personally written. Yes, as it's written that everybody can ask questions. So your questions are most welcome. But till then, we will not waste our time because every single minute is very important right from here. See, facing prelims was also a tough part, but now we are going to have a competition with best among the best, and only those who fought for that extra mark, that extra 1 mark, are going to get interview calls from the commission. So take your preparation seriously, and micro plan your timetable and your schedules. Okay, so there was a question that we'll go to the question now. It is argued It is argued that the strategy for inclusive growth is intended to meet the objective of inclusiveness and sustainability together. Comment on this statement. Very beautiful. What we have discussed right from the what we say LPG reforms, the end of the permit Raj and the license Raj era, to this point, uh, suddenly uh, the renowned thinkers, economists of this world, came to the conclusion that alone globalization or privatization or um, um, LPG liberalization, uh, these as the tools are not going to serve the purpose of the growth as such whole, because yes, they are promising growth, but economic inequalities are increasing. See, the Kuznets curve talk about that. The economic inequalities are definitely increasing. So the growth is there, but only 1% of the rich are making huge profit, and the base of the pyramid is again being pushed back in the extreme poverties. So the concept of inclusive growth came, and I think that the last planning commission, they also had their motto of inclusive growth. But again, some thinkers came that this growth shall not be just inclusive but also sustainable, because the reckless exploitation of resources, exploitation of the resources has pushed back our uh, just a minute. The exploitation of resources for our economic development has pushed back the concept of sustainability, and also has cost us on the environmental degradation, which is actually an economic bubble. See, if the average worker in a metro city like Delhi is working, definitely earning more than his counterpart on the countryside, but he has to face the challenge of water pollution, air pollution, which decreases his or her status or his or her family's health status, which again increases the out of pocket expenditure, eroding its eroding its income. So on one hand, yes, they are earning, but on the other hand, due to unsustainable and reckless exploitation of resources, we are changing the climate in a very wrong way. We are taking the environment in a very wrong way, and that is also costing our pockets. So the purpose of economic, socio-economic development is uh, is defeating. On one hand, you are one hand you are completing your goals, and on another hand you are equally losing. So concept of inclusive and sustainable growth came into the picture. So uh, who defined inclusive growth was World Bank, which said that it should the growth should be broad based, it should be shared, it should be pro poor growth, can live, you cannot afford to leave no one behind. It is a paradox that 52% of India's employment comes from agriculture sector, which only generates hardly 15% of our GDP, and it consumes 80% of our water resources. So this is a highly skewed economic scenario. It is a very bad economics. See, so always right, move up and move out approach for addressing rural or agrarian distress. Your farmers are there, you cannot ask them suddenly to stop agriculture. They have been doing here for centuries. So move up on the ladder and then move out of that enterprise. This is the way. And how you will do it is by very beautiful food processing industry. It's a very ideal model of economic growth. What it does, it first thing it is in it will boost the rural enterprise. Another, it will create jobs in the rural sector. And what kind of jobs? You don't need any specialist degree to work in a food processing enterprise. See, food processing enterprise not only absorbs the food surplus, but it also absorbs the surplus labor, semi skilled or unskilled labor also. So this is the model for sustainable growth. It's utilizing the resources which would have gone waste. This is one sustainability. It also sustains the nerve of rural economy by absorbing the semi-skilled or unskilled labor. So this is a beautiful model. Self-help group, same thing. Sharing of resources, redistribution of resources, investing it in the proper way. So these are the ideal case studies that you need to mention in 2 to 3 lines in your answer if it's for 10 marker question. And for 15 markers, you can definitely have a paragraph on that. So that will be appreciated by the examiner, because too bookish language, I repeat, is punished. You keep it very simple. You you share, you write in a simple language, but in an innovative way, right? So, inclusive and poor growth, we have done. Uh, Financial inclusion, the current government is working very hard on financial inclusion. What is financial inclusion? That if the term pops financial inclusion, then you need to mention the Jandhan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity, JAM Trinity, where a Jandhan account is there, which is backed by the biometric security of Aadhaar and the mobile interface, mobile OTP clearance. So this is how you have a financial inclusion which is diverse, broad-based, and secure. And these are the key requirements for a financial inclusion or inclusive growth. Okay. Case study. What can you write in a inclusive growth which is sustainable? Uh, I had written the role model of Ralegan Siddhi village, headed by Anna Hazare ji. So utilized, he boosted the community participation with some ethical code in the economic development of the village in a sustainable way, which was not only inclusive but also sustainable. And Anna Hazare ji focused not only building the financial capital in the village, but they also built social capital in the village. So what is the difference between financial capital and social capital? I would ask you to read from the Google. These are very beautiful terms. Whenever there will be financial capital question, you always mention in a counter view that the social capital is also important, because once you build social capital, it will again help others to build their financial capital, and this is how a virtuous cycle is set up in the society. Next question we will take from 2018. What, how are principles followed by Niti Aayog uh, different from those followed by Erstwhile Planning Commission in India 2018, means economy, Indian economy? So first thing, Niti Aayog, uh, one cardinal rule: never mention short terms. Always use long terms. Even if the question paper is saying Niti Aayog, but you are expected to write National Institution for Transforming India and then bracket Niti Aayog, and then you can use Niti Aayog. But first start, you have to mention somewhere that it's the full long form. So, is it a constitutional body or is it a statutory body? You might know that it's just an executive resolution, just like the erstwhile Planning Commission, which was also set up by the executive resolution. Neither it's a neither it's a constitutional body, nor it's a statutory body. Okay, so uh, it was passed by executive resolution, and when it was established on the 1st of January 2015. Okay, so Niti Aayog, Planning Commission. See, Planning Commission had this top-down approach, trickling theory, where the policy was determined, policy was discussed, analyzed, and determined on the highest levels of the executive, and uh, then it was expected to trickle down to the bottom. Uh, that was the concept of that time, but in this networked and integrated world, this is not going to work, where every human resource need to be working. The top to down approach is not going to help. We need bottoms up approach, and this was what thought was of this is what is the opinion of current reputed economists. So the current government accepted that opinion and view that we need to address it from the bottom up. So, Niti Aayog has said that policy shall be made in the considering the ground realities with the people's participation. See how it's different. What we are writing is the approach of Niti Aayog and how it is different from Planning Commission, and that's what it's asked in the question. So, people's participation, decentralization of growth, decentralization of growth. Plus, it has also done very good thing uh, that uh, it has advised the government that government shall not be the competitor in any enterprises, but government shall also reduce its role as a regulator and increase its role as a facilitator. Facilitator. B2C. Because you just need to connect. You just need to be connecting the people or demand and supply. You just need to be the facilitator. Also, uh, Niti Aayog is focusing on the Niti Aayog has rolled out the strategy, short term, medium, and long term. It has also released the paper strategy at 75, India at 75. That's a very good book. I will advise everyone to take a copy, Xerox copy. It's available free PDF, or you can read it on your laptop or iPads. Uh, the content and the language is very nice there written. It's a Niti Aayog document. Sorry. So in Niti Aayog uh, can be it's working on the crisis that India is currently facing. Niti Aayog's water management index is there. The sustainable. It is also working in the sustainable area. It can be a tool for women empowerment. through gender sensitization, equality, transparency. And one basic difference between Niti Aayog and Planning Commission is the budget rights. Niti Aayog does not have any major financial rights. They cannot create or allocate the budget, which was uh, in which right was with the Planning Commission. Okay, so these were the stark differences, and uh, I had made my notes where I had written this answer that this is a shift, major strategic shift from planning process of top to bottom to the process of boosting federal and fiscal competitiveness. Sorry, competitive and cooperative federalism in this country. So this is how I would have written this answer into. So uh, again, we will go through a brief synopsis of how to address the question. First thing, completing your answers is the first requirement of this examination, mains examination. You will have to develop good writing speed, and yes, it can be improved in 2 months. I have improved myself. Uh, there is a means doctors can't write good. That that is a myth. I am correct. Definitely, doctors can write good. Anybody can write in a good language, good handwriting, and good speed if practiced. Practice is a key because you will hardly, as I said, you have to write uh, 20 around 25 words in 60 seconds. That too in an ideal case where but some seconds will be lost in thinking. You There will be some moments where you might struggle to reproduce the content or some information in the examination hall. Also, take it for granted that approximately 10 minutes are wasted in the formalities like filling the roll numbers, marking your attendance on the attendance sheet. There will be some disturbance. Examiners might be talkative. So these are some distractions that I would suggest you to be ready for. Okay. After that, first important thing that come after completing the papers. Next important thing comes is about the quality of the content. And quality of the content comes from the vocabulary. And vocabulary comes from the very syllabus that commission has given to you. The syllabus has been printed. You take out the print and you post it on your bedrooms. You post it everywhere where it's possible, and regularly visit those places and try to remember the words which has been given in the syllabus. Those are the keywords that are going to get you marks. Also, another thing, after the quality of the content, means it will definitely come from government sources. For economy, I would suggest you to download a Financial Express app. uh, in that Financial Express app, I mistakenly said Financial Express, Economic Times. In that Economic Times app, there is a section of news, and in that news, economy so is a subsection. You go on that economy in the Economic Times app, you will get all the relevant material, means current news material, which has been happening for the last 2 to 3 years in our country. And believe me, it's very useful to get hold on some concepts. Okay. Also, I used another app called as Naply. Okay. The content uh, is also good. If some interesting news comes on that, it's no doubt you can have a read over it. So, speed, then quality of the content with value added materials, and third is presentation. See, examiner is going to identify is going to explore you through your answers and writings, irrespective of the fact what you have, how much efforts you have put or hard work you have done. Uh, the only thing that is going to project your personality or your way of thinking in front of examiner is through your answers. And you cannot afford to you definitely cannot afford to write substandard answers. So keep in mind that keep your resources limited. Make your crisp notes. Notes means don't write thesis on any concept. Just 4 to 5 bulletin points. Just like as I said, if financial inclusion is there, question is there, then the immediate thing that needs to pop in your mind is Jandhan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity, JAM Trinity, because this is one of the most important tool of financial inclusion of the current government. Okay, so this is how you will save your time and you will perform very much good. You will perform better in your examination. Okay, uh, I think nobody has asked any questions, so we would like to. I would I think Commission has just rolled out name-wise list who has cleared the prelim examination. You can also download from the website of UPSC. And my best wishes to everyone. If anybody has more doubts about regarding economy, definitely you can contact through this platform, and I'll be happy. I'll be happy to help you out. See, this is a journey. It's a very long journey. UPSC is not a UPSC is definitely not an examination where only knowledge is tested. Your holistic personality, your temperament, patience, persistence, consistency, your niche, your work, your thinking way, everything gets tested. So it's a very long journey. Be ready for that. Unpredictability was also there, but that shall not deter a serious aspirant like you and me from achieving what we aspire for. So, my best wishes to everybody. Do hard work, do smart work, do some physical exercise daily for 15-20 minutes, light exercises to cheer your mood up. As I am a medical doctor, I know the biochemistry of this body. A bit exercise, a bit of yoga meditation is very helpful to improve, boost your confidence and memory. Also, if you need anything in the future, I'll be happy to share my further my notes or my strategies or to clear your doubts. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Best wishes.